The latest update on the Cypress Arrow Tina Fry case, setting the record straight. For the first time today, we are now hearing from attorney Randall T. Hayes. He is out of Alexandria, Louisiana, and he says he is the lawyer representing the whistleblower in this case. And his client, he says, Alicia Alsop, who at the time all this went down was a kennel manager, he says, at Cypress Arrow, that Alicia got in touch with him over possible animal abuse at the kennel. Hayes going on to say Alicia told him some of the things that she had seen Miss Fry do and that she wanted, she says, the abuse to stop and all the dogs at the kennel to be rescued. So the attorney going on to say that Alicia wanted to, quote, bypass RPSO. The reason why? Well, he says because Tina Fry was an RPSO deputy sheriff. Hayes saying Alicia was afraid of retaliation, but she was more afraid, he says, that Fry's connections would get in the way of a proper investigation. Her greatest fear, he says, was that Miss Fry, he says, would have the opportunity to hide or dispose of dogs before they could be rescued. Even if Cypress Arrow could be shut down, he went on to say, Alicia worried that dogs owned by the kennel would be at risk of being put down. Now, over the next few weeks, he says, Alicia and he discussed the kinds of evidence that would be needed for a proper investigation. Alicia, he says, and some of her co-workers had already begun collecting some of that evidence. That they had also discussed Alicia's concerns about Miss Fry's purported connections, how much of an obstacle they would really be, and how to avoid that obstacle. The attorney going on to say there was no doubt that Ms. Fry held herself out as a law enforcement officer, that Cypress Arrow's website claimed that the business was, quote, law enforcement owned and supported, end quote, that she listed her RPSO commission among her certifications. And in a magazine article displayed on the website, Ms. Fry twice, he says, cited her position as a law enforcement officer as a necessary factor in her success as a dog trainer. Ms. Fry, he said, emphasized her law enforcement connections, even if they were not as significant as she claimed. It is understandable, he says, that Alicia would be afraid of what could have gone wrong when she tried to report the abuse that she had learned about. So rewind a little bit. In late July, Alicia contacted the Louisiana Attorney General's office, her lawyer says, and they had told her they don't handle animal abuse cases and advised her to call local law enforcement. Also in the latter part of July, Alicia, he says, contacted the Humane Society of Louisiana. Jeff Dorson, he's the director there, was a great help, he says, in working toward a solution in this matter. Then, August 1st, Alicia contacted, he says, the RPSO to report what she knew. And at this time, she was still an employee, he says, at Cypress Arrow and hoped to assist the investigation and the rescue from within the kennel. Fast forward 3 days later, August 4th, he says at the direction of a lieutenant with RPSO that Alicia made an anonymous call to an RPSO substation to report animal abuse, he says, at Cypress Arrow. And shortly after that, 4 RPSO deputies, he says, arrived at Cypress Arrow to conduct a welfare check. And during that check, he claims Alicia got a call from Tina Fry demanding that she hide an emaciated puppy in Miss Fry's house. Alicia, he says, refused. And before RPSO had even left Cypress Arrow, he claims Tina Fry fired Alicia. Now, Alicia was the only Cypress Arrow employee fired on that day, August 4th. So he says it would appear that Mr. Drell's claim of revenge as a motivation was directed at Alicia. Mr. Drell, of course, is the attorney for Fry and her daughter. And 2 days before the arrest, Fry and her daughter's attorney, as I said, Brad Drell, went on record. He released a statement in which he said that his clients were innocent of any claim of animal cruelty, quote, innocent of any claim of animal cruelty. The Drell went on to say that the released videos were, quote, surreptitiously created by an employee who circulated these videos almost 1 week after she was terminated from Cypress Arrow on August 4th, end quote. He also said, quote, revenge for her firing seems to be this former employee's primary motivation in releasing these videos and in contacting clients of Cypress Arrow, end quote. That was Brad Drell, Fry, and Victoria's attorney. And now we know that the former Cypress Arrow employee is the client, Alicia. This is what this new attorney, Hayes, is saying. That there is more to the story, he says, of what Tina Fry and her daughter Victoria and others did at Cypress Arrow, and that story will be told by the investigators, he says, and eventually the prosecutors handling the case. Alicia's role, her attorney says, in this story needed to be told now. Tina and Victoria's defenders, he says, are not going to be allowed to hide behind their claims about a fired employee seeking revenge. Going on to say, he must add that Alicia was not the only person at Cypress Arrow working to save those dogs. Other people, he says, played very important roles in documenting and exposing the abuse they witnessed, he says, at Cypress Arrow. Alicia was, however, the only one who was indirectly referred to in Mr. Drell's statement, he says. We're not going to let that go unanswered, Mr. Hayes says, so stay tuned for the next development.